Thursday that will allow them to begin work on President Donald Trump's legislative agenda with a 216 to 214 vote along party lines. 2 Republicans joined with Democrats in voting against it. The vote came after a dramatic turn of events Wednesday night in which ultra-conservative members of the Freedom Caucus and deficit hawks refused to vote for the existing plan over concerns that it would lead to a skyrocketing national debt. Then House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune announced Thursday morning that they would find $1.5 trillion in cuts as part of the package, indicating that significant changes to Medicaid and other benefit programs is still on the table. Our 2 chambers are directly aligned also on a very important principle, and that is the principle of fiscal responsibility, Johnson told reporters. He added that Republicans aimed to deliver on their campaign promises while achieving the maximum amount of savings, all while also preserving our essential programs. Republican leaders have said it is possible to find deep cuts to Medicaid and other programs without impacting services by rooting out waste, fraud and abuse, though nonpartisan experts suggest that is not likely. The resolution approved Thursday will be the blueprint for a massive bill that Republicans hope to pass through a process known as reconciliation, which avoids the need for a supermajority to overcome a filibuster in the Senate. That would allow the measure to pass in both houses of Congress with only Republican votes. The package will eventually include Trump's priorities for border security, domestic energy production and taxes. If it passes, it would be the marquee law of his second term in office. The blueprint instructs the House and Senate to craft separate proposals that will eventually need to be reconciled, and the Senate's instructions, as written, require lawmakers to find very few spending cuts while implementing the president's expensive tax proposals. I think that the Senate didn't do Trump any favors. I think that they're setting him up, and us up, to screw us in the end and not cut any spending whatsoever, Rep. Eric Burlison, RMO, told USA Today Wednesday on his rationale for voting against the resolution. We need to put guardrails in place to make sure there's at least a minimum level of spending cuts. But Burlison and about a dozen other skeptical Republican House members changed their minds after Johnson and Thune assured them that the Senate would produce enough spending reductions to offset a portion of the tax cuts and planned spending on border security and domestic energy policies, despite Thune being slightly less straightforward about the Senate's commitment to spending cuts. He said he and his colleagues would do everything we can to find $1.5 trillion in cuts, which caused another last-minute scramble to convince ultra-conservative House members to join them. The flip came after days of intense pressure from Trump and his advisors. Trump told House Republicans at a fundraiser Tuesday night, "Close your eyes and get there." What is in the blueprint? The skeleton plan both chambers have now agreed to lays out separate spending instructions for Trump's legislation that will ultimately be hammered out between the chambers and fleshed out with detailed policy. The Senate's plan would allow them to lock in the tax cuts implemented during Trump's first term, which are set to expire this year, an incredibly expensive endeavor that would add an estimated $3.8 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years. The Senate's plan would also allow for an additional $1.5 trillion in tax cuts, leaving room for Trump's plans to eliminate taxes on tips and overtime and other tax priorities. It requires virtually no spending cuts but has a non-binding target of eventually finding $2 trillion in savings over 10 years. The Senate plan would also raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion, which would avoid a looming default on the federal debt and help Republicans avoid negotiating on the extension with Democrats. The blueprint also instructs the House to follow separate rules, which required finding at least $1.5 trillion in spending cuts over the next 10 years. The House's plan also allows for an extension of Trump's 2017 tax cuts and allocates $300 billion for spending on defense and border security. The 2 Republican lawmakers who voted against their party on the bill, Reps. Victoria Spartz, R. Indiana, and Thomas Massie, RKY, argued the assurances from the Senate the cuts were not enough for them. When are we going to get serious about spending? Roy asked on the House floor Wednesday. The Senate sent over a joke. We're going to be sitting there in a reconciliation debate and we're going to end up with the short end of the stick, but worse, the American people are going to end up with the short end of the stick. Because it absolutely increases deficits. No one can deny it. It's not just House members that have a problem with the Senate's instructions. Several Republicans and Democrats in both chambers are concerned that the blueprint will lead to significant cuts to Medicaid, the health insurance program that provides coverage to 72 million low-income Americans. The House's instructions include a directive to cut $880 billion from the jurisdiction of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which nonpartisan experts have said is not possible to meet without slashing Medicaid. Several GOP lawmakers, including Sen. Josh Hawley, RMO, have said they cannot support the final package if it includes significant cuts to Medicaid. But Hawley voted to approve the Senate's blueprint, saying that he'd spoken with Trump, for a good bit, who told me the House will not cut Medicaid benefits and the Senate will not cut Medicaid benefits and he won't sign any benefit cuts.